Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for taking us, through this tour of these are pretty unique spaces with unique histories. And I guess what struck me, Val, one of the ways you were framing SOX was that artist labor was at the center of everything. And I think you can hear that both from Maria with artists building walls, Darlene with the kind of massive. Both on the inventory side, but also I want to eventually get to the publishing side, this idea of an institution that, that begins, I'm talking so much, right? An organization that kind of begins as a publication. So, there is this sense of artistic labor that you brought to the table. There's also, Maria, I didn't realize that Some Arts had a specific call for artist services and those different services you listed, whether it was the costume bank and I was just really struck by this idea of like labor services, which strikes me that it goes back to CETA's like, what is this for? Who is this for? And then also, Val, your comment about artist-led spaces are often less transactional in the way they kind of present exhibitions or go about their work. And I was just recently having a conversation about the fate of Fort Mason, and one of the frustrations is always I still feel we're very much based on a project-based model. So when the project is over, we've gathered a community, and then we go to the next project. So I have a lot of envy for projects like the Farm that could have this kind of longevity, and kind of keep going. So I do all of that just as an invitation to maybe ask you to meditate a little bit on, what are the kind of relationships with artists you're forging moving forward, or labors you're seeing emerging, or needs that are not there that in your next chapter would be important. I mean, I think, Darlene, you were already bringing up the problem of some of just the digital archive. One of the reasons I was really adamant about doing a book for this exhibition was I'd spent a lot of my career at other orgs at when everyone thought the archive of the website would be forever, and now all this work I did is gone. The links are gone, and so. There was this real utopian impulse that we'd have this digital library forever, and now I'm really staring at the fragility of it, thinking, let's go back to some nuts and bolts books that you were making or publications.
I get requests for certain articles that were published in Artcom Electronic Network. Anna knows this. And I don't know where they are or how, what to do about it. We did print out everything and gave Stanford binders of printed, dot matrix printouts of articles that were in the Artcom Electronic Network. But a lot of it's in the ether. No one knows how to access it. It's scary. So.
Yeah, and I guess I'm just thinking about the way La Mamelle provided a publishing platform, a way for ideas and artists to circulate. Like each of these orgs provided like a necessary infrastructure for artists that was lacking elsewhere. And so I'm just wondering where your thinking is all going about the next infrastructures that are necessary, or what you might be cooking up or wishing. I mean, even Val, just your ability to let artists have a voice about the situation in Gaza, which is really difficult for a lot of organizations to do.
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, I feel like the needs have not changed. It's still a need for artists just to connect with each other and just continue to have conversations. And I'm so jealous looking at the photographs of that you have at Some Arts as I've gone through our archives for today and for our 50th. Like, we don't have photos of the early days of what happened at Southern Exposure. We might have like a few little scraps of like a typed out or handwritten Xeroxed thing, and there just isn't a lot of visual information. So I mean, I think you're right that like what happens to things.
Well, and the other thing I worry a lot about all this stuff, but it's one thing to have the images, the artist books, the postcards, the things that are displayed in the exhibit, over there, which is a fabulous exhibit. But also, as part of the archive, and very important, I think, would be all the underpinning of what went into making that. All the fights that the artists had about, how to display something or how a project would, be realized. There's a lot of that stuff that's actually interesting and telling about how an artist organization and how artists interact with each other. And unless it's captured some way and put into an archive, there's no way of knowing. Like Robert and Andrian, we're worrying and fretting about the Bonnie Sherk archive, and we've been working on it, and it's sitting over there at the General's residence. And it's one thing to make sure that all the posters and the images and the done material, the stuff, finished material, that goes into the archive. But what about the meetings of the board or the arguments, that they had about how to do a project? We just saw the State of the Union, or some of us saw State of the Union address that Biden did. That's the residue, that's the finished product. But all the stuff that went behind it, all the discussions, all the history, the research that goes into it, that could be really vitally information or interesting to some crazy people who like Ryan, who like doing research, in depth.
But it also speaks to, I think, which is another theme kind of the day of Bonnie's idea of the life frame and of establishing kind of more non-hierarchical relationships, whether it's between people or people and animals or people in the environment, because you're not dealing with some kind of imperial idea that we may have had of the curator who picks stuff and everyone runs around and makes it all happen. And, these are definitely, you're dealing with councils and groups of people who are having to work together. It's not auteur theory when you're coming to these places, which I think is also fascinating.
Yeah.
I was just going to say that one thing I've learned at Soma Art, so we are doing this rebranding project, and we don't have a history page on our website. And I feel like, wow, what a tremendous oversight. So I met with one person who, I think her name was Lenore Chin, if everyone's heard of Lenore Chin. But anyway, like a community, I don't like to say elder because that makes people think like I'm ageist, but I'm just saying that she, has been around a long time and has gathered a lot of histories. So I set up a Zoom meeting and I said, okay, I've got a pen and a paper here. I want to tell me all the things. And as she started talking, it was like I put the pen and paper away and I just listened because the history was so tremendous. I really love to document all of it. So we have decided to embark on this project where we're speaking with more people in the community, recording these sessions. So I recommend that, if you're trying to gather history, it's not even just about the postcards and the printed material, it's in the people who are still with us, who launched a lot of the things and initiatives and, the way that we're carrying on into the future. And I see Rodessa Jones here, and Rodessa was one of the persons that we recently had on video, and most of us had our mouths open the whole time. We must have looked really ridiculous to you because we're like, that happened, and this person, and this, and that, and whatever. And it's just so beautiful and so rich that we're going to hire an archivist, actually, to really do a deep dive, and we recognize this as a 5-year project. Because I think it's really important that we do keep up with our histories and we also maintain them, because in that is our reasons for continuing to exist in the future. If you don't have a past, you have nothing that you're really building on. So it's very important that you document all of these things, because that's our social capital, that's our artistic capital, that's the capital of the organization, is its history. So I just wanted to speak to that part of it. And I forgot we were just mentioning before that, though, something else that I wanted to mention.
What was that? Either non-hierarchical or infrastructures for the future.
Non-hierarchical. Okay, so I arrived to Soma Arts from SF MoMA. No problem. I love SF MoMA, don't get me wrong. But I was thinking about like how hierarchies are in some ways the death to creativity and anything interesting, you know, because once things go through a really too controlled situation, it's problematic, and we're experiencing it right now as it relates to even censorship, because who gets to control how far an idea goes, who gets to control how much is said or how little is said, or any of those things. And so at Soma Arts, it's a fine tune, it's like a gray area that I have to operate in, because you know, I removed as much of the hierarchical structure in the organization, recognizing that an arts organization is nothing without the artist. And so I go to a lot of community meetings where people are trying to decide, even in this moment, how are we going to recover? What does downtown recovery look like? I know the artists are going to do it. And so organizations marshal the artists in, they give them a small amount of money, and it's like, thanks, bye-bye. But that is a transactional relationship. It's like, I have a problem, I'm bringing you in to fix it, as opposed to an artist saying, we have a problem, we don't bring you into this situation, and because we're bringing you into this situation, we want to find sustainability for you. So, and we're not really doing the work of creating a meaningful longevity for arts and culture if we're not prioritizing the artist, especially if you're running an arts and culture organization. And so therefore, you need the artist to be part of how are you even managing that organization. And we're sometimes afraid to bring artists into what's known as business conversations, because we make assumptions about what an artist may understand about operations or this or that or the other thing. But the artists actually are such a key component and structure, like helping organizations learn how to do a better job of being intentional, because that's all they've ever been. That's all an artist has ever been, because it's always been them and the thing they're creating, not a lot in between. And so as an organization, we have the city, we have jurisdiction from one commission or another commission. There's multiple layers that we're always fighting just so we can, you know, extend at the very end of that something the artist can do in a space that isn't going to bring the police department or the fire department, which is always the thing. So, you know, I just say all of that because I have been involved, and this is probably not the conversation, but I have been involved with a lot of recovery conversations because of the situation we're in San Francisco right now, and I think that we can't divorce these conversations from the current moment that we're in. And so as we're thinking about how do we reconstruct the city, we need to think about that from the scaffolding of the artist, much as, you know, without the artist, Soma Arts wouldn't exist. So I think about, like, you know, what artists were able to achieve without the political rhetoric that we tend to go to City Hall and give comments, and the petitions, the this and that, it all matters. But the artists, you know, with tools directly in their hands are able to affect an impact. And so I think that's something to think about as we think about the history, like going back to Soma Arts. You put a tool in an artist's hand, what are they going to do? They're going to build a building. Thank you. I am running for office. I'm throwing my hat in the ring for mayor. No, just kidding.
Can we take some questions? Manoush, go ahead. No, oh, sorry, go ahead up front.
I was just asking, you said that the nonprofits are in a different place today, so were you just answering that? Or what is it today? You said, all of you mentioned that the nonprofits are different now.
Yeah, are there ways you would characterize the kind of difference in the way you work as a nonprofit than perhaps when you were founded? I'm sure it's a lot more official.
I don't know what is happening these days because our organization closed down in the 90s. But when we started, it was all we had to support ourselves. So that's why publishing was and distributing video was a means of making enough money to be able to sustain ourselves. And, you know, the NEA existed, but every time we went to them with a new idea, they would say, it's too new. We had a really hard time getting funding from the California, council, and then also the NEA. We did get grants, but we didn't want to depend on grants. So we tried to be self-sustaining by publishing and distributing our own video, but distributing a lot of video by other artists. And by doing that and not paying anyone, we all had separate jobs, we were able to sustain the organization.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Southern Exposure wasn't a nonprofit when it was started. It was a very insular little group of horizontal group of friends showing each other's work, and I don't think anyone was paid. And when people aren't getting paid, you also are excluding a lot of people who can't afford to participate. And so I think for us to become a nonprofit and become a space where we're prioritizing paying artists and paying staff and, trying to pay people a livable wage in such an expensive place. But it becomes a different sort of organization. And we can welcome in different folks into the organization. And just thinking about your point about kind of like horizontality or hierarchies, and just we're not a horizontal organization any longer, but we can't be sustainable as a hierarchical organization if we're not accountable to people, if we're not listening, if it's not a constant conversation happening.
Go ahead in the second. Go ahead. Yeah.
So I'm really interested. So I lived in San Francisco in 1982 when I moved there out of college. I've since moved, but anyways, I was a San Francisco for 36 years, and I saw the evolution from a really vibrant arts community that had, artists with workspaces and legal or not legal or whatever. And I knew all over town, where people were doing work and, all the different venues that you mentioned today. And I'm just kind of curious with these conversations about the reimagination and reinvention of San Francisco, how much of it is a stronger bit. There's nothing wrong with little pop-up shops for artists to show their work, but is there anything bigger that people are also, that's a sort of a short-term, quick, way to bring people in, and it's good. It's a good way to get it started. Valencia Street was very different in 1980 or 1985, say, than it is today. And Soma, same thing. And so many other parts of San Francisco were a completely different place than they are today. So I think with this reimagination that needs to happen in the downtown area, is there a bigger conversation than just these little sort of quick event type, quick little, I don't know how to describe it. You know what I'm saying? I think you know what I mean.
I do know what you're saying. I'm on probably 4 or 5 committees right now that's having the same conversation, and my suggestion at each of these meetings is, why aren't we all gathering and having this conversation? Because there would be more of an impact, because if you have one small group that has a small amount of money that they're giving to artists to do things in storefronts, who knows it's happening, and what's the impact, and what's the long-term plan for that? And so we're kind of in this very strange moment right now where we can almost see why we're in the moment that we're in, which is, like I said earlier, when the cultural centers were given to, when these buildings became cultural centers, they were given to organizations at a time when those neighborhoods were experiencing an economic downturn and blight. And so that's why it was easy for the city to say, hey, we don't want this building. You're going to be underneath the 101. Another person is going to be over in Bayview Hunters Point. Someone else is going to be in the Mission District, because real estate value wasn't the driving force of the economy. And so we had a couple of different waves of economy that haven't had an impact on why we're in the moment we're in. And so the real estate economy, the growth of all of that and development has, driven, obviously we all know this, that artists have left for more affordable destinations, and now they're going further and further and further afield, all the way out to Modesto. Like, I know an artist that moved to Modesto because they found a big garage that they could rent, and even that was kind of an insane proposition. So in terms of a larger vision, Frank and I are also on a committee that has a really interesting idea around something that would involve more of the arts and culture assets across the city as a way of kind of uniting us, because we're not going to be that effective if we're doing it district by district by district, and we layer in the political agendas that supervisors have over money for that particular. So it's you bring up a great point, and I think that we're in this moment of re-election for mayor, or mayor election, I should say, and I know a lot will depend on the next person that's coming in, but I think we can have an influence on those conversations, and we should. And I think that's what we are all trying to do in our own way. But we are a city, just to be honest, we are a city that's missing what's known as an arts and culture infrastructure plan. And some other cities like Dallas or something, or Pittsburgh, why were they able to come up with something that has an impact for a whole city? Because they got buy-in from all of the people. And so we need to get buy-in literally from developers and the building owners and the landlords. Everyone needs to be in on it. And it can't be transactional, like we just want you to come to our empty space to make it look good so we can rent it again at a higher rate. Thank you very much, artists, for making my neighborhood fun and interesting. Now go away. And so I've been inserting that voice in those meetings, like, great, Mr. or Ms., building owner, it's wonderful that you want to bring artists into your space. What's your long-term plan for these artists? Because if you're talking about $1,000 to do a mural or some sort of pop-up, and the artist has to also buy their materials, and the artist also has to, somehow get to this space, which means some mode of transportation, there's a lot of pressure being placed on artists to be the people to change things around in San Francisco. I believe the artists can do that, but there has to be an infrastructure of support that plugs into a bigger vision, longer term vision for the city. And I think that this is our moment. As horrible as this moment is, I think that these are the opportunities, because everyone's starting to sit at the table together. So I've been in meetings with building owners and with landlords. It took me a lot to not stare down at them in those meetings. I will be honest with you. Because my thinking is that has been a driving issue in our lack of affordability and lack of space in the city. But I really appreciate the question, and this is a very important moment for us to entertain that.
And, yeah. I'm gonna have to stop us, take a 10-minute break. I'd love to, we should come up with another roundtable where we can really address, because this is a really pressing issue. So I thank all of you for bearing with us as we run a little bit over. We're going to begin our final session, which will speak to this idea of kind of getting the memory of your organization, understanding the history as we look back at the farm, with Chip Lord, Robert Kroonquist, and Rodessa Jones at 5 o'clock. So we'll see you in 10.